The Farms.com Wheat Report is brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada.
Hi, I'm David Sparling, the Chair of Agri-Food Innovation at the IVEY Business School. At IVEY, we recently released a couple of papers looking at food manufacturing in Canada. We've done this work with the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, who really are interested in what's affecting agriculture and food processing in Canada. We looked at the food industry a couple of different ways. One, we looked at the overall performance of the industry compared to other sectors. And one of the things we found was not a surprise to us, but I think a surprise to a lot of farmers, a lot of people in general society, and a lot of governments. Food manufacturing in Canada is the largest manufacturing employer, and it's also the second largest in terms of revenue. But not just that, it's a really stable industry. When the recession hit, all the other industries in manufacturing took a huge big hit. Revenues plummeted, they had big layoffs. In food, that didn't happen. What happened was revenue kept growing very slowly over the entire recession, as it does all the time. And employment took a small dip, but then came right back. And overall, we're ahead in terms of revenue, and we're a little bit ahead in terms of employment. So, very stable industry. One of the other things that we noticed when we looked at food manufacturing jobs was that there's a shift starting. And that shift is from direct manufacturing jobs to more indirect jobs. So we actually saw direct manufacturing jobs shrink a bit, but indirect jobs pick up more. And that, I think, is the reflection of the move to more technology and to more automation in the food manufacturing industry. The second study we did really looked at food manufacturing plant closings and openings. And we know that those are important. When you look at something like Heinz, you've got a plant close, all the farmers in the area are trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do with our product? Who's going to buy it? Do I have to change from tomatoes to producing something else? And so food manufacturing plant closures are really big news. But when we started looking at it, we realized that's not enough. We need to look at openings and major investments by food companies. And when we did that, what we saw was 2007, 2008 was a tough time for the entire industry. Way more closings than openings, and that's when the job losses occurred. By 2009, companies were starting to balance out in terms of openings compared to closings. We also saw by 2010, investments were going up by food manufacturers, and there was starting to be a balance of closings versus openings. So interesting from that dimension. When we asked companies and looked at the press releases and we found out why they actually closed, what we're seeing was an industry that's restructuring. We're seeing companies open new plants with high technology and really trying to be globally competitive, and we saw them closing their old plants because they just are too small, the technology is too old, and really when you're in the environment they're in right now, things have to change. And the environment's tough for food manufacturing. You've got a higher dollar, which makes imports cheaper and it makes it harder to export. You have input costs rising pretty significantly and a lot of competition among retail chains, which means processors can't actually pass their higher costs on up the chain. And so they're being squeezed a lot. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing this big focus on competitiveness. What does all this mean for farmers? Well, I farmed for 20 years, and my processor was my most important partner because I needed them to buy my product. And that's the same for most farmers. Across Canada, at least 60% of everything we produce on farms goes to some kind of food processing, food manufacturing company. In Ontario, it's even a little higher, probably around 70%. And so it's really important to have a healthy food manufacturing industry in order to have a healthy farming industry. And so looking forward, what would I like to see? I'd like to see a little more attention from governments on food manufacturing. I'd like to see focus on trade deals so we can export our farm products and our food products all over the world. And I'd like to see programs that encourage investment in new plants and in new equipment, really to make our industry globally competitive so that we can have all the economic benefits but also a place to sell our farm products. If you'd like to see this report, you can go to the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute website or to ivey.ca/agrifood. And they're both reports, the first one on the performance of the industry and the second one on plant openings and closings. Thanks.
The Farms.com Wheat Report has been brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada. Visit www.clearfield.ca/wheat for more cereal solutions.